Hello, everybody. Welcome. It is finally the day. I have been prepping for this video for 4 months. I have been reading these books for 4 months, and I have completed all of them except one, which I'm still in the middle of, but it's part of a series, so I feel like I've read enough to talk about it. So we are gathered here to discuss the 2023 Goodreads Choice winners. I have read all of them. And I have thoughts about all of them. So I want to just jump right in. Before I forget, I keep forgetting to introduce myself at the beginning of these videos. So hello, if you're here, welcome. I'm Nova. This is Off My Rocker Reading. I have been trying so hard to stay quiet about these books for the past few months. Even though they've been in my monthly wrap-ups, I haven't given like my full thoughts about all of them because I feel like there were a lot of ups and downs, and I knew that I just wanted to compile it in one video, which is what you're watching today. Obviously, if we're gonna talk about these, we kind of have to address the elephant in the room. There was like a category change this year, so we don't have, I actually just this morning like looked at the categories from last year, and like there was a poetry category, and there was a graphic novel category, and there was a middle grade category, and those are all gone. I understand why they made the changes that they did, just because of what's popular right now, what most people are reading. I totally get it. They might not be genres like Romantasy, for example. It might not be a genre I really partake in, but I understand that that's like a big deal right now. So you want to give people the chance to be able to vote on that. I get it. But I do kind of wish that they had kept the middle grade category just because I really like reading that. But I understand probably not a lot of other people do. So again, if it's just like a majority thing, I get why they made that choice. I read the Plant-Based Brides video talking about the Goodreads winners like last month. I think that came out, and I'm gonna take a page out of her book, pun not intended, I hate puns. I'm gonna take a page out of her book because I'm gonna talk about the categories that are like the least interesting, because I have a lot to say about some of these, but they tend to be, you know, the more popular ones. So I'm just gonna get a couple of those out of the way first. One last disclaimer before I get into it, I'm not gonna be summarizing the plots in this video. I usually do that in my monthly wrap-ups, but I don't wanna waste time doing that here. I'm kind of assuming if you're clicking on this video that you know these books and you will kind of know what I'm talking about. Because again, some of these I have a lot of thoughts, so I don't want to waste time and this end up being an hour-and-a-half long video, you know? So to start out, I want to talk about the, I think it's history and biography category, maybe. You know what I'm talking about. And the winner of that category this year with 40,132 votes was The Wager, A Tale of Shipwreck, Mutiny, and Murder by David Grann. This is a historical account of the sinking of this ship and what happened when they were stranded, and then what happened when some of them were able to return to England and had conflicting accounts of what happened. Truly, the title of this book makes it sound more exciting than it is. I liked this book, I enjoyed it, but I enjoyed it on the basis of it's an interesting story and not really because of this author's writing. I feel a little scathing saying that, but I just found the writing really dry, and some of it was also just very clunky at times. A lot of times when this author was trying to use like certain writing devices, it just ended up coming off kind of like awkward, I guess. I'm really mad at myself actually because I highlighted some examples of that when I had the book and I forgot to like screenshot them. So I was gonna read examples here for you, but I don't have them, unfortunately. I think like the structure of it was good, I suppose, like the pacing. It got like a little boring at the end, but the pacing overall was pretty good. I liked the addition of the indigenous people that helped them when they were on the island. I liked learning about that aspect of it because a lot of that is just erased from these kinds of stories. However, as far as whether or not it deserved the award for this category, I don't feel like I can really say because I have not read any of the other books in this category. So it's a little unfair to say no. I don't really think this is a very strong book, so I would be surprised if there wasn't another one that was a rival for it. Overall, I liked this book, but more for the actual story versus it as a book. For the humor category, I think this is a weird category because you get like different kinds of books. Like there's like a collection of essays on here, but then this is like a memoir. The winner ended up being like a memoir. So yeah, it's a little bit of an odd category, but the winner with 36,770 votes was Being Henry, The Fonz and Beyond by Henry Winkler. I know who the Fonz is. I would like see the Happy Days commercials on the Brady Bunch DVDs that my family had growing up. So it's not like I'm so out of touch that I like don't know the history of this or like the context. But this still isn't something that I personally would typically pick up. I find that these kind of celebrity tell-all type things just aren't for me. I don't love them most of the time. But this one I was actually really pleasantly surprised by. I listened to the audiobook and I think that that was a game changer because he reads it and, you know, he's an actor, a very well-loved actor for the roles that he was in. So I feel like he just brought a lot of charm and likability to the story that if I had just been reading it, I don't know if it would have been there. But he really made the audiobook and made my listening experience. I had a really good time listening to this book. It's a very light-hearted book, I would say. I don't think it really digs in too deep to anything too heavy. That's not a problem though, you know. He talks about his family, he talks about his wife. I loved just the times he would talk about his interactions with other celebrities and the shows that he would do. But the really cool added layer to this is all of it really is told through the lens of him opening up to us about the fact that he was not a very confident individual at this time. He was not confident in his personality. He was not confident in his abilities. And it's cool to hear him now having kind of worked through some of that with like a therapist and that kind of stuff. He also includes little bits told from his wife's perspective, which I thought was really cool because she's been with him for a long time and has been through all of this stuff with him. So overall, I was pleasantly surprised by this book. Do I think it deserved the award? Yes, I would say so. I don't know if it was necessarily the best book out of this list, but I think that this was pretty strong. Again, it's like a weird category because I'm sure other books in this category would have more than qualified for this award, but it's kind of a mishmash of things, so I don't know. I give it to him. I give it to the old Henry. After that, I read the nonfiction winner, which was Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond. There's quite a few books in this category that I was really interested in that are on my TBR, but that I never got around to last year. So I would be interested to read some of those now and see what I think. However, I do think that this is a great book. It's a really deep dive into the way that American society treats poverty, treats people who are disenfranchised, and treats the systems that we have in place that a lot of times just perpetuate these issues. And sort of the stigma that we have surrounding change a lot of times because so many people are so attached to this idea of capitalism. I loved when he talked about how our version of capitalism is not necessarily what the original intention of these systems were. I totally get why this won because I think that it is talking about stuff that is very, very important to right now in America right now. There are some really powerful numbers and statistics in here. I kind of regret listening to the audiobook because of that, because I would have liked to see some of those. So I do think that I will be checking this out again in the future to kind of go back over some of that information and really like digest it. My only complaint is that I don't think it really had a very satisfying wrap up. The conclusion I found to be kind of lacking. The author would have done well to add a final chapter of just tying it all together and maybe giving like some practical advice sort of, or I don't know, not that it needs to be advice. It's hard. The conclusion was lacking for me. There was like some kind of like afterword or something that I felt like he did a little better in of doing that, but I'm like, not everybody's gonna read that because you're calling it like an afterword or like acknowledgments or something. You know what I mean? So I just feel like it needed another chapter or something. But did it deserve to win? I would say yes, and I understand why it won. I think that this is important stuff to be talking about today. So I'm okay with it winning. Even though there was some great stuff in this category, I think I think it deserved it. If you've watched some of my other videos, you probably know that I love memoirs. I think writing a good memoir is an art. I think memoirs are extremely powerful books. And as you can see, I have my Britney shirt on. I actually just bought this like literally a couple days ago, but I figured it was kind of appropriate for this video because we're talking about her book. And boy, do I have thoughts, okay? So The Woman in Me by Britney Spears won this category with 132,867 votes. I do just want to preface, despite the fact that I have some strong opinions, I want to preface by saying I do love that she has a platform to tell some of her story. Emphasis on some, because this is a very short book. But I think that her getting to say her truth and everything and touch on some of these subjects and give people an idea of what was going on for her during these different periods of her life, I think that's amazing. That should be propped up. That should be celebrated. I have no issue with her getting to do that, right? I do believe that she had a ghostwriter working with her on this book, if not writing the whole thing. So I just want to throw that out there. But yeah, I have some issues, especially the longer I think about it. I think in the moment reading it, I feel the emotion of her being able to tell this story and everything, but kind of reflecting on it as a book, as like a piece of art, it really did not meet the bar for me. The first and one of the biggest things that was really pissing me off during this book was the way that we were just glossing over some really important and interesting behind the scenes information that would have added a lot of context about how she grew up and the way that she was living her life. We kept glossing over things like that in order to talk about her pop culture moments more. And I was just like, I'm not here to read or listen to pages and pages of her talking about the snake, wearing the snake at the Super Bowl performance. I don't care about that. Just to be totally honest, like me personally, I don't care about that. I'm here for her to be able to talk about the real stuff, because this story is based on the premise that nobody knew what was going on behind the scenes a lot of the time. And so why are we getting just this surface level what was going on in her career? I don't want that. I don't care about that. I can look up that performance. You know what I mean? And it was comical sometimes how short the descriptions of different things would be. It would be a sentence dedicated to some major thing, and then we just move on to something about Justin Timberlake. Literally at one point, and it was closer to the beginning of the book, she's like, at this point, I was prescribed medication, and also something happened to my parents. And then the chapter just ends and we move on to something completely different. And I'm like, wait, hold on. Those are two big things. Can you explain? Can you hello? It unfortunately felt to me a little bit exploitative, right? Why are we talking about this? Why are we, I know she had control over this, but why are we forcing her to talk about this crap, this pop culture garbage that I don't care about? Why are we not letting her tell her actual real life story? It was just confusing to me. I don't understand why that was the choice. And then my other issue is just a memoir is supposed to have some kind of narrative theme. It's supposed to have some kind of lens through which you are telling your story. So I've talked about this book before, The Faraway Nearby. That book is about telling your story, but through the lens of storytelling. So fairy tales and folklore and stuff like that. So it's got an idea, a theme, and then it's telling your story to accompany that. It's they tried to do that in this very shallow corporate type of way, where it's I feel people sat in a room and they were the woman in my body, the woman in me. They had a think tank to think of a tag for this book, and then the ghostwriter just slapped it in there a couple times during the narrative, being and that's how I reclaimed the woman in me, and that was how I felt the woman in me coming back. What? That's just not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough, and it was a little comical to me. There is something to be said for this one, as well as the one the Fonz wrote, that they're celebrities, and that is probably a big reason why their books are getting voted, because people see Britney Spears on the cover or Henry Winkler on the cover, and his book or her book is getting the majority of the votes from people who haven't actually read these or whatever, or who are just like diehard fans. I just feel like they're definitely, even though for this year, this category really was full of celebrity memoirs, I still feel like there was probably a more compelling memoir to win an award like this. So do I think that this book deserved to win like the memoir category? Probably not. Can we be real? The audiobook was like 6 hours long. First of all, it was short. And then just like the other things I was saying, like, I think it's great for her to tell her story in every medium that she can, but it just kind of felt like rushed and like, again, very corporate in a sense. Oof, okay. The next category I want to talk about is young adult fiction. And the book that won for that category with 68,736 votes was Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood. Listen, I am not the demographic for this book. I don't read romance, and I don't really read young adult fiction. So I just want to say that. I have a mostly negative opinion of this book, but I am not the person who is really well read in this kind of genre. So, take my opinion with a grain of salt. If this is what you like and you're very well read on this and you're like, no, this is actually good compared to other things, like, go off. I don't know. This is also personally my first Ali Hazelwood book. I never planned to read one of her books, but here we are. I just think that this book tried to inject some serious topics without doing that very thoughtfully or well. Like, if you want to write a silly little romance, like a silly, crazy, ridiculous romance like this, that's totally fine. But when you're gonna kind of shove in some bigger themes and you don't handle those with care, then I'm like, what are you doing, Oh, this is a silly thing, but the first thing that I didn't like about this book is immediately when we're introduced to the main character, the first few times that we interact with him, the emphasis is completely placed on his looks. And he's chess champion of the world, but he just happens to be this 20-year-old hunky McHunkster. And I'm like, why? Why does he have to be Beefy McMahon cake? Like, he's a chess champion. And also, like, we're not talking about his intellect here. We're not commenting on anything other than this man's biceps. And I don't know why that's necessary. It just feels like playing into beauty standards because the author knows that that's going to get the girlies reading her book. And I don't know, why? Why couldn't he have just been like a dorky dude? Mance plays chess for a living. We don't see him work out, ever. So, I don't know. I appreciated that she tried to touch on the misogyny that goes on for women who try to enter the chess world. I think that that's really important, and obviously if you're going to write a chess-related book, especially with a woman main character, you have to talk about that. And I think that as far as like the themes in this book, I think that she did that the best. But I do feel like it was like one guy was perpetuating these kind of misogynistic ideas and everybody else was kind of behind her. And it's like, that's not really a real experience. At least that was my reading of it. I don't know. I might be forgetting something or omitting something, but that was my general gleaning of that theme. And then the other thing that is my biggest issue is the whole premise of this book is that this girl has to take care of her two siblings and her mother because her mother is chronically ill. And she's like this parentified 18-year-old, and it's up to her to like take care of these kids, but also like make money for them and everything. She's like the breadwinner. And that's not good. Parentification is not a good thing. And not enough people know about what that means and what that is. And in this book, it is never really addressed. That's the premise. That's where we start. And then we just kind of get this like family reconciliation that it does not involve talking about that whatsoever. And actually the mom and the daughters end up kind of putting more of the blame on her, as if she's just doing this. She thinks she's mom. She thinks you don't have to take care of that. Like, you're not doing anything? Like, of course she does, right? And I don't like how she ended up kind of being the bad guy in this reconciliation and never really got to say her piece or anything. And because of that, I actually found the mom and the sisters very unlikable. Because I'm like, you do not appreciate what this girl is doing. Like, she doesn't have to do any of this. She could bounce and leave you guys, you know? Like, she's 18. It just bothers me because this is a young adult book, and I feel like there's potentially going to be young readers consuming this story, and you kind of had the opportunity here to maybe let them know that like this is an unhealthy dynamic if they are in this dynamic. And it could have ended up being something very like subtly educational, and I just feel like the ball was really dropped. I'm not an advocate for like really explicit sex scenes in young adult books. I know that's kind of like a hot take and a debate right now online about the young adult category specifically, but that's just my opinion. And lastly, I just thought the character motivations were kind of silly. They were kind of all over the place. Like, she hates chess because her dad cheated on her mom and he liked chess, which is just a little ridiculous. And so when she's offered this amazing chess fellowship, she's just not gonna try because I'm just not even gonna try. But then she's winning like $10,000 per tournament, and the whole issue for her and her family is money. So I'm like, girl, you better try, because this is the most money you've been making. And what motivation do you have to not try if you have the potential to be winning all of this money and taking care of your family? And just the ending too. Why did we pan up from the like climactic moment of this like chess championship match between the two main characters? You know, we just pan up and we flash forward to like 2 years in the future or something. And I'm just like, why did we need to do that? Do I think it deserved to win? I don't know. I didn't read any of the other books in this category, so I'm not gonna comment, but this was not my favorite thing. After that, I just want to talk about the young adult fantasy category with 117,671 votes. Divine Rivals took it. But I don't really have a ton to say about this book because for me, it was just kind of a mid-reading experience. I don't really feel super strongly one way or another. I like that it was a wartime novel. I like that there was actual like world building, and there was lore, and there was an established magic system. I think that that's all really good and necessary. The idea of the magical typewriters, that was really cool. I like that they kind of interacted that way. It makes sense to me that they would like fall in love over that medium because it's so whimsical. But the focus of this book really is the romance. And to be totally honest, I thought that that part was the biggest lack in the story. It just felt pretty weak because they're kind of it's insta love. Like, let's be real. Like, it's marketed as if they're like, oh, they start as like rivals, so it's like enemies to lovers, you know? I do not agree with that. They are infatuated with each other from the very beginning. They say like, oh, I'm so annoyed. Oh, I'm so annoyed. But then in their heads, they're like, oh, my feelings. You know, like they have feelings for each other right away. So there's little to no payoff for the romance. It progresses very quickly when you consider how they end up at the end of the book. And I also just feel like character motivations in this book, once again, were very muddled. Because girl, why, if you dislike this man and he's your rival, why are you asking him to get a sandwich with you? Like, literally like 10% into the audiobook. Do you, the person watching this, do you ask the people who are your rivals, the people who bully you, the people who you don't like, do you ask them to go out to lunch with you? No? Then why is our main character? Why would a character do that then? Because it's a person. Again, the character motivation there, I'm confused. Why are we doing that? And then the other thing too is I just don't really see what their motivation was for trying so hard to get this column, because we established pretty quickly that this newspaper is kind of like corrupt in the sense that it's like a toxic work environment and they are censoring what these people are writing. We very early on established that there's this war correspondent job. This man just ran past my apartment window. We established that super early, that there's this other cooler job. What is our character's motivation for staying here at this like yucky newspaper and not just going and doing that in the first place? It just kind of, the pacing was like weird because she's like, the author's trying to fit in all this stuff into this like first book. So it felt too fast. And again, I think probably some of these weird character things were due to the fact that it was so fast. However, do I think that it deserved to win? Even though I did not feel strongly about this book one way or the other, I'm going to say a big fat no. Because one of my absolute favorite books from last year, and absolutely the book that blew my mind more than any of the other like 130 books that I read last year, was A House of Roots and Ruin. And that was also nominated for this category. And that should have won. It is so underrated. Not enough people have read these. It's the sequel to House of Salt and Sea, or A Sea of Salt and Sorrows, or something like that. Whatever that book is. I read that one too. It's fine. It's not as good, but House of Roots and Ruin, oh my gosh, ruined me. And now I have to wait for the next one. So yeah, I would absolutely say that A House of Roots and Ruin was robbed. Absolutely robbed. After that, I'm just gonna talk about the fantasy category. I actually didn't write anything down. I just forgot about that category entirely, which is funny because that's the book that I'm currently reading. So I read Ninth House for this video, and then now I'm reading Hellbent. And I really don't have like too much to say about it. I understand why it won. It's a very popular author. It's a very popular series. And so far, what I've read so far, I like it. I liked the first book. I do understand the criticisms that I have heard of this book, of this series, of this author even. I do understand it. And I even like agree to a certain extent. However, I still really like these books. So again, I understand why it won. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me at least tell you what it is and like how many votes it got. So the winner was Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo with 75,800 votes. I also read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. People raved about that book, so I'm kind of surprised it didn't win. Some of these other ones I have on my want to read, but the only other one that I've read is Starling House. I was okay with Starling House. So yeah, I mean, I get why this one won. The premise for these books is so cool. I love like the vibe of them. I love like the dark atmosphere and themes and everything. Again, I get the criticisms of like sometimes the author is like taking it too far with no warning. I do agree. Like to a certain extent, I do agree. But I just personally, I really like these. They're very up my alley. So do I think it deserved to win? Probably. I don't know. They're popular, and I also think they're popular because they're good. So that's kind of all I have to say about those ones, TBH. Now I'm going to talk about the romance category. This is another one. I don't have too much to say. This is not a genre that I read. So this was very out of my comfort zone as well. The winner was Happy Place by Emily Henry with 157,687 votes. Whew, that's a lot. That's a lot. Yeah, I stay away from stuff like this. It's just not my thing. I don't like books where it's just romance. Like, I'm fine if there's romance in a book, but ultimately I usually end up finding it kind of boring. But I surprisingly really like this because I really liked the writing, and I think that this author does a really good job of capturing the feelings of this like relationship between these two people. So I found myself like rooting for this couple, and I felt like by the end I felt invested in whether or not they got together. And I think that that is the mark of a successful romance, because if it is going to be just romance, I at least want to be invested in that couple, in their dynamic. And I think that she did a really good job of that. There were some small things that bugged me. I do just want to point out, I don't like the not like other girls narrative that we established like right in the beginning, where the main character like, oh, she's just so tiny. Like the memes write themselves, you know, yeah, I just can't really believe anybody like seriously describes their characters that way anymore, but like whatever. And then, she also is like, I just don't know how to do a whole face of makeup. Like, girly, ugh, okay. I would like this character way more if she's like whipping out her Charlotte Tilbury and like not being annoying about being short. Again, though, I don't read this genre. I haven't read any of the other books in this category. I really cannot say if this deserved to win or not. I was a fan, a tentative fan. I do think I will probably maybe pick up more Emily Henry in the future. Yeah, that's it, I think. I have so much written down for the next category. Okay. Next, I'm going to talk about the mystery and thriller category. I read a lot of mystery and thriller. I love both of those things. I love both those things. All of those things, every of those things is both at the same time, both one of the other times, one of each. Okay. I love that genre. And I've actually read a lot in this category. So I read None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I read The Only One Left by Riley Sager. Did not like that book. Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jessie Q. Sutanto. I also read Bright Young Women. I also read All the Dangerous Things. I have some questions for you. So I read a lot in this category. But the winner was The Housemaid's Secret by Frida McFadden with 86,468 votes. Crazy. is the word that comes to mind. I read one of these on my drive down to Florida last month, and then because this is the sequel, one of them on the way back up. And I was just sitting in that back seat with my dog, flabbergasted. Truly. I said this in my last wrap up, but I did not realize that in the same way that we're getting these very ridiculous, not super well written fantasy books that are just kind of like appealing to tropes and stuff, we are also kind of getting that in the thriller world. Because other than The Wives, I have not read another book quite like this. These are, just for me, they're too ridiculous. To the point where like there are plot holes. Like this, they're set in today's world, but this would never happen today. This could never work today. People have cameras, okay, just for one singular thing that makes the entire plots of these books like crumble. People have cameras in their house, especially rich people, okay? But truly, my biggest problem is the main character. She is propped up as if she is somebody that we are supposed to be rooting for, and she's not a good person. And not even in a cool anti-hero type way. Again, I talked about this in my last wrap up, and I actually gave some recommendations for good anti-hero type books. So if you're interested in that, you can pop over there. Plug. But yeah, especially in the second one, it felt like we were supposed to be happy, like when she gets like her vengeance at the end. And I'm like, no, you suck. I don't want to see you happy either. She's violent and she's judgmental and she's like awful to the people around her. I can't think of a good quality that she has. So I just don't care if like somebody wrongs her, like, okay, like you suck anyway too, girl. It's probably karma for you too. I need to take a drink. Sippy, you like my Wawa. ASMR. Oh, but the biggest thing. I'm in a silly, goofy mood. I will not lie. I feel like I've been drinking or something because I don't know. I don't know what it is. The biggest thing, sorry, getting back on track. The biggest thing, she is constantly belittling the other woman characters around her. Not the men, not people, not the men, not the kids, the women, truly. And at first, when I heard the argument of like, oh, this book, like, it's so like sexist and like there's like fat phobia and stuff, I was like, because at first I was reading these kind of moments where she's calling out these different things as kind of more of a criticism of rich people and how they don't know what to do with their money a lot of times. A lot of times, like, they're out of touch, they can be shallow, and I'm all for criticizing rich people. However, by the second book, by the end of the first book, I realized, hold on. The men are also rich. So why are we not ever criticizing them for their wealth and what they buy and stuff? The men are always described as like, oh, he's like intimidating in his like he's professional in his suit and he's like making money and he's so suave and handsome and sexy. And first of all, men, but the women, on the other hand, are just picked apart. Their appearance, what they do during the day, their jobs, the tone of their voice is even mentioned and written about differently than the men, and like what products they use. And it is endless. The main character is never checked for this behavior, for thinking these things. It's never brought up. And I'm not trying to like be slanderous right now, but like I have trouble believing that that's not just a reflection of the author. To be totally honest, if you're writing this stuff and you're not writing it as if it is wrong, I have news for you. Cause like, why are you as an author expecting me to like root for this character that treats women like this? Crazy. No. And it just concerns me that, these are like the winners. Like, did it deserve to win? Absolutely not. Aww. Again, I read quite a few on this list. I'm very surprised that Bright Young Women didn't win, but I read quite a few, and I would have picked any of those to win over this book just because of some of this content, and again, just the plot holes. I did not like Riley Sager's book, and I would have picked Riley Sager's book over this one for sure. Okay, so the next category, I want to talk about the science fiction winner, which was In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune. And I have beef with this book, dude. I've read his other books, and I've really liked his other books. This is barely science fiction. Let's be real. They're very light versions of science fiction or light versions of fantasy, like whatever he writes. And like, just because there's robots and something doesn't make it science fiction, but okay. And yeah, this was like his worst book for me. I love Under the Whispering Door and I liked the other one, but this was just a total miss. It was so long for no reason because there was so few things that happened in this book. And there's just so much of like these robots like bantering, and that gets old after a while. And the love interest felt so forced. It just felt like there's a love interest because it's a TJ Klune book. So like, of course they meet this like hunky cyborg guy for him to fall in love with. And usually TJ, writes these kind of lighthearted musings about humanity and human nature and stuff, and a lot of times I do feel like it feels pretty genuine. In this book, it really just didn't for me. It felt forced, and it felt like he was just adopting the tone of his other books without actually having anything to say. I don't remember who I heard say this, but the other thing too is like the tone of this one is weird because it almost reads in a very juvenile way, except that the robots are like constantly talking about sex. So it reads almost like a middle grade kind of adventure book, but then we have like these like robots making jokes about how like they don't have penises, and it's very like confusing, and it's a little off-putting because of that. So I don't think this book knew what it wanted to be. So did it deserve to win? Probably not. Aww. Even though I read a lot of science fiction, I haven't read a ton from these nominees. I don't feel like I read as much last year as I usually do. I read Starter Villain, that was okay. I read Chain Gang All-Stars, that was okay. So I don't know like what I would have picked to win for this this year, but definitely not this. This is all I have to say. Okay, we're getting into it. We're getting real right now, okay? You're gonna hear some of my hot takes because I'm gonna talk about the horror category. The winner, with 77,993 votes, was Holly by Stephen King. In a previous wrap-up, I gave my thoughts about Stephen King and why I do not like him. I feel like maybe I should just say them again. I don't like him. I feel like content-wise, Mans is putting out some weird stuff and has put out some weird stuff that somebody should check on that. But really my biggest thing is I feel like he just writes stuff and like I've described it before as just like he throws it at a wall and just like hopes it sticks, and like once in a while it does, and like yay, new popular Stephen King book. But like I feel like it's quantity over quality for him, and I'm not a fan of that. So I'm not the audience for this book. I've never read another Stephen King book. I don't plan to ever. I don't care that some of them are like horror classics. I don't want to read them. But I saw some people say that you like have to read the first 2 books in this series to understand this one. And I do not think that that's true. I think that they're pulling that out of their butts. I didn't even realize that this was part of a series until we're like introduced to this character, and the vibe is that like we should already know who they are, but it's not like in any way that changes anything about the plot or anything. So I don't agree with the notion that like I didn't understand what was going on just because like I didn't understand her one phone call with this like dude that like ends up not being even relevant in this story. Nothing about the plot hinges on me knowing who those characters are, other than just gathering that she has known these characters in the previous books, okay? But this book absolutely should not have won the horror category for the Goodreads Awards based on the simple premise that it was not a horror book. Let's be real. Let's be so real right now. This was not a horror. Stephen King stands, I will fight you on this. I dare you. I dare you to tell me that this was a horror book. You cannot. Stephen King used this book and this series to talk more about his thoughts about COVID and poetry than he did about anything scary. This is a novel of Holly thinking about COVID and the other character working on her poetry with a weak serial killer plotline slapped over the top of it that's not even as thought through or well developed as a average Criminal Minds episode. Where's the horror? Where's the horror? This whole time, I'm sitting here thinking, where? I don't care what Stephen King thinks about COVID. That's not why I read books. I've said it before. It's not why I read books. I don't care about his like opinions. I don't want to read books about COVID or current events personally. That's not what I read for. So I don't even like that was the biggest topic of this book to begin with. But then we get this side plot of this other character who we know from a previous book. And she like sends some poetry off to a contest and starts like working with a writer like on her poetry and stuff. So I'm like, where's the horror? Again, where is it? Because these are the 2 biggest things that happened in this book, and neither of those are scary. The poetry thing is really what I want to hone in on here, because I just find it extremely odd that Stephen King, a middle-aged white man, is writing from the perspective of a young woman of color. What does he know about being young today? What does he know about being a woman? And what does he know about being a person of color? Whether he's liberal or not. And to go so far as to, in the book, give her opinion about racism in poetry, saying like, poetry transcends racism or something insane like that. I'm just like, how is this not being called out? Why have I not seen anyone talk about how weird this is? Yeah, I hated this book. I don't even want to talk about it anymore. I feel like I talked about it a lot whenever it was in my wrap up too. I hated it. I absolutely hated it. It was not an encouragement to read more from him. And I'm sorry, I think that it only won because people go, oh, Stephen King, click, vote. Like, stop it. Stop doing that. Just skip it. Skip the category. Ridiculous. Voters, do better. Please do better next year. Speaking specifically about the list, I read a lot of the ones on the list for horror this year. I read How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. That's my favorite Grady Hendrix book, and it is the one that I voted for. I read Rouge. I DNF'd Silver Nitrate. I read Lone Women, hated that book. I read Black Sheep, hated that book. I hated Mr. Magic. I wanted to like that book. Oh, I read Natural Beauty. That was pretty good. So yeah, I read a lot of these, and this would not have been my pick for the winner. Whew, 3 more categories. Okay, we're getting into Romantasy territory now, which obviously the winner for the Romantasy category was Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros with 397,565 votes. Are you serious? Okay. I think enough other people have made videos saying everything and anything and all the things that I could say about this book. So I don't want to waste too much of my energy on it and get my blood pressure up too high. This was my other least favorite book out of all of these. I wanted to tear my eyeballs out and my eardrums out. I listened to it. Why was it so long? That's my first question. I can't believe this even got published, much less had hundreds of thousands of people voting it for some kind of award. And this is why people are arguing that TikTok and social media is ruining the quality of the books that are being published, because this book reads as nothing but a money grab to me. It's appealing to all the people who love fantasy right now, to all of the readers who love romance right now. It's focused more on writing for tropes and giving us some spicy content. It's truly one of the most poorly written books I've read in recent years. And again, I don't have the time to get into why this is bad. And I have respect for you, even if you're watching this right now and you like voted for this book, I have respect for you if you acknowledge that it's bad. But I absolutely cannot fathom how anybody could like argue that this is like a good book. And I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm kind of tired of the people who are like, yeah, I know it's bad, but like, I just like books with dragons. Girl, because like, literally like less than 5% of this book was about the dragons. So there is zero world building. There's zero thought to the world here, to the religion here, to the languages, to the culture. These characters talk as if they live today. There's like zero establishing of the magic system at all. And there's also zero continuity with either of those things, with the world or with the magic that's going on. And all of the characters are just caricatures. They are just there for a second to give us some exposition, or they're just like these very like shallow, like non-characters that are just there to further the two main characters hooking up by the end of the book. Boring. And that's why, to me, it just felt like an extremely poorly written excuse to write very anatomically puzzling and lame sex scenes between these two characters. And again, with this one, the characters and their motivations, they make no sense. He's like, one of the biggest things is that he's supposed to like want to kill her the whole time. Never attempts to do that. Never even says that he wants to do that. Like we're told it a million times. We're told everything in this book. The author never shows us anything. We're told that she's like a bookish character, but she is not like any bookish person I've known ever in my whole life. We don't see any evidence of that ever. It was like so ridiculous, and not in a fun way, because it upsets me that this is like the most popular book of 2023. Cause it is just not good. And I will die on that hill. I don't care. Again, it feels very corporate to me. It feels like a money grab. It feels like somebody like, they have a team that's like looking at the TikTok content and they're like, oh, they like this. And they make a little pie chart and they're like, they like this and they like this and they like this. And we can put a book with all those things. And then they feed it to us and there's people who just like eat it up. And I hate that. For the fiction category, the winner was Yellowface by R.F. Kuang with 200,722 votes. That's crazy. I wasn't gonna read this just because of the various criticisms that I've heard about it, and I also I didn't read Babel, but for this video I decided I was gonna read it because it won, and it was better than I expected as far as like my reading experience went. Like the writing was better, the story was better than I expected. It was at the very least a well-constructed story with good writing. The biggest thing that I liked about it is I felt like it played out really realistically. Like I feel like something like that, I could see it playing out the way that it did in the book in real life today. And I liked how we kind of got sucked into the anxiety of like being found out after doing this. And so we're like, oh no. And then the main character would just like say something so out of pocket and I would be like, I want her to get found out. Like, why am I being like I'm getting like sucked into like the tone, and like then the author would just like hit us with like some microaggression and I was like, oh yeah, wait, I want people to know that you did this, you know? However, I've heard a lot of very valid qualms and criticisms of this book. I loved Cindy's video about this. I think when I talked about this book, like, I linked her video. I'm going to do that again. I'm also going to link Rachel's video about Fourth Wing. That's like a huge deep dive into those two books. And I think that those are amazing too. Even though it's very likely that if you're coming here, you probably already know those two people. But I'll link them because I love them and I respect them. So yeah, I was just kind of turned off from this book just because of some of those things that I would hear about this author and everything. And I do also just find it insanely cringy that the character in this book that's like the beautiful, successful writer is like a self-insert from this author, and that this book largely was written from a place of not liking the criticisms that her book would get and that her writing would get. I just find that like really cringy, especially because like at that point you're kind of just like painting all of your haters as, actually I'm gonna say you're painting all of your critics as haters. Like, people who do reviews are allowed to have opinions about your book, and like writing a whole book to like partially like trash on them is like kind of crazy. Should this have won for this category though? And for me, I have to say a big fat no. Absolutely not. It's a crime that Hello Beautiful by Anne Napolitano did not win. More than I think any of the other categories, it's actually upsetting to me that one book won over another one, because I truly think that like of all of these books, of everything that I have read in the modern day, I think Hello Beautiful has some of the biggest potential to be heralded as like a classic in the future. It really feels like a lasting piece of literature to me. I liked it way more than I expected to. I read it at the very end of last year, and yeah, just a very beautiful, impactful book. And it's upsetting to me that it didn't win, and that it's not the book that's getting like 300,000 votes. You know, it got like 70,000 or something like that. Yeah, it's a very lovely book, and it's disappointing to me that it didn't win. Other than that, I also read Tom Lake. I was not a super big fan of that book. I read The Invisible Hour. I was not a super big fan of that book. I read The Collected Regrets of Clover. I liked that one. I DNF'd Big Swiss. And I think that's it from this category. And lastly, I have the historical fiction and debut category to talk about. And if you know, you know, the reason that is being lumped together is because one book won for both of those categories, and that was Wayward by Amelia Hart. I don't really think that books should be able to be nominated for more than one category. Just my personal opinion there on that. I saw that there's like a lot of doubling up of nominations, especially in this debut category. I just feel like there's so many books that come out each year, and there's only like 12 of these categories. I don't really think a book should be able to win more than one, but that's just what I think. And especially like this book, Wayward, it was good. It was just not like mind-blowing, and definitely not to the extent of like winning 2 of these. I read it last year, but then I reread it specifically for this video, and my opinion didn't really change much. I remembered that I liked it more than I first thought, but it just didn't meet the like 5-star level for me, I guess is what I'll say. Like, it just wasn't perfect to me. Like, it lacked in some way. I think the writing was pretty good. I think like the idea was pretty good. I feel like it didn't really dig in the way that it could have and probably should have, because it's dealing with 3 different timelines, 3 different women, 3 different societies and realities and experiences. I feel like there's so much in here that should have or could have been like a gut punch as I was reading it, and I just kind of felt oddly disconnected from it. And I think that I've heard a lot of really valid criticisms of it as well, like that the magical element actually kind of ended up taking away from this book, because at the end of the day it just kind of feels like the author is not saying like women are powerful inherently just because they are human beings and they're worthy and they're women, and instead it's like, oh, this like specific line of women is powerful because they have literal magical powers, right? And I also heard like people say that it's very focused on like giving birth and like having a womb, and like that being the definition of womanhood, and like finding power in that, and that's very like ew to me. Women are not defined by their wombs or their ability to give birth. As somebody who likely will not be able to give birth, I just think that anytime I encounter something like that, it's icky for me. That's not what makes a woman powerful. That's not what makes a woman worthy or equal. It just kind of, at the end of the day, feels like, I see you, mama, propaganda to me. You know? Do you know? I hope you know, because that's like the best way that I can describe it. Like, I see you, mama. Stay strong, mama bear. Energy is what that is giving out of this book, and that's not my favorite thing. Should it have won for historical fiction? I would personally say no, because I don't really think it should even count as historical fiction, to be totally honest. Like, there's not enough like legit history in this. In the same way that like not every book with robots is science fiction, I also just feel like not every novel that's set in a different time period is historical fiction. The history part was just lacking. Should it have won for debut novel? Also no. I think if it was gonna win for one of these categories, it would and should have won for debut novel. But for me personally, The Bandit Queens was one of my absolute favorite books from last year. And again, it's another one that just continues to be underrated. I feel like it's like a hot girl book. And like, I don't understand how the like hot girl book girlies haven't found it yet. But just the fact that that one is a debut is like astounding to me. So not only did I love it more as a whole, but it's just, I also feel like it was a stronger debut. So I absolutely stand by the fact that that book should have won, or at the very least have been read by more people last year. Okay, that is all of them. 4 months in the making, and I'm actually done with this. That's so crazy for me. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what your picks were. Let me know what you think, if you agree, if you disagree. I know there were some hot takes in here. Since this is gonna end up coming out at the end of this month, I will be back very soon with another video. As always, I don't know, whatever, like, subscribe, whatever, all that stuff. But like, more so than anything, my social media is in the description, and I really would love to connect with people. So, go find me on Instagram for sure. That's the one that I'm most on. But yeah, thank you for being here with me today, especially if you made it this far. All the love. So I'll see you next time. Mwah.